In this video, I'm gonna explain the strategies for winning business simulation games, like the Hubro business simulation here, which is the one most commonly used in academic contexts. I'm gonna be giving a general strategy for winning these games that you can adapt to the specific circumstances of your game. On this first slide, I've added Bloom's taxonomy of learning, which we're not going to pay any attention to. I'm just going to show you how to win these games and gain the bragging rights from winning them. These games are getting to the bottom of it, essentially about making decisions and deciding on strategies for winning these games. Now, most of the decision variables in these simulations are uncertain, meaning that you'll have to get an intuitive sense for what the best decisions are. For the decisions with certain decision variables, you can of course use calculations if you have enough time, but I'll get to that later. This video will not explain how these business simulations work. I'll simply be showing all of the secrets and giving a general strategy for how exactly to win these games. And it's pretty straightforward actually, which I'll get to later, so just pay attention for the first part of this video. The first thing that's really important to note is how the game is set up. Usually in these sorts of simulations you're gonna be playing in a group with some of your classmates. The important thing to note is if your group is going to be playing against just bots and then compare your results in the simulation against other groups in the class, or if you're going to be in the same simulation as the other groups in the class. That has a lot of implications later that I'll get into. The most obvious one is of course that if you're going to be playing against bots and not in real time, your group might get like a week to finish the simulation, which gives you a lot of time to do calculations and really think things through. While if you're going to be playing in real time against your classmates, you might get like 2 to 4 hours to do it. I've added a little meme here for my Gen Alpha viewers to keep your retention up, so keep paying attention. This is important, okay? Now, an essential element in creating your strategy is how much time you're gonna have, as I've discussed earlier. If you have enough time, you can use net present value calculations, given that these two variables are known and can be used to calculate. It's a very simple formula once you understand it, and it tells you the value of making an investment and can be used to decide if investments in the game are worth it or not. If you don't have enough time, you simply won't be able to spend time on this usually. So it's simply a trade-off you'll have to make about whether to spend time on making a lot of calculations or not. Now that I've explained the general context for the game and my strategy, I'm gonna go into my specific strategic recommendations. First of all, things to pay attention to in the first few quarters of the game. To begin with, the marketing budget of your competitors. If you're playing against AI opponents, it's really easy to figure out how much they spend on marketing and then just beat that by a couple of $1,000s, which means that you're gonna be getting the best contracts every round, which is going to be important later for my recommended strategy. If you're playing against human players, they're obviously a lot more unpredictable, and you might have to make a trade-off between how much you actually want to spend on marketing versus how important getting the best contracts are. Now, as for the research spending of your opponents, this one is really important for my strategy. All of the research in the game has, generally speaking, their own cost, meaning that every single research option costs a different amount. So when you look at the budgets or the balance of your opponents from the previous round, you can see how much they spent on research, and you can know what they researched, which is going to be really important later, and really ties into the general strategy of looking at what markets your opponents are going to be going into, so that you can choose a market that others have not started researching yet. Next up is production capacity. Now, in these games, there are usually both loaned production, which is outsourcing, and own production, which is your own factories. Now, the gimmick here is usually that loan production is cheaper, while own production gets the benefits from the research that you're doing. So own production scales a lot better late game, essentially. So the essential strategic consideration here is how long the game goes on for, which decides which one of these two is the best option. If the game goes on for maybe 5 quarters, then loan production will probably be the best decision. While if it goes on for 10 or 15 or 20 quarters, then own production scales so much better late game and gives a lot of cost reductions. Next up is debt and cash flow. An important thing to note, which is at least the case in the Hubro business simulations, is that only a certain amount of debt can be taken each round. It's $1 million if I remember correctly. So going above that will result in credit debt, which has a much higher interest and should be avoided if possible. But for the strategy that I recommend, I will say that taking massive negative cash flows and covering it with debt is completely fine. If you're using it for research and building factories, which is an essential part of the strategy that I recommend. You should, however, not go over the maximum amount of low interest loans at $1 million. The pretty easy way around that is that if you need 800,000 in loans one round, and you can plan ahead and know that you'll need 1.2 million next round, then you'll just take 1 million this round and the next round, and essentially plan ahead in order to avoid taking credit debt, which has really high interest and cuts into your profits, and as such cuts into your accumulated capital at the end of the game, which is what we're trying to maximize in this game in order to win. Now, you should remember that depreciation and amortization is gradual. So making investments in the late game into research and production can still be good, because those factories and investments count as assets at least for maybe 10 quarters or whatever period they're depreciated or amortized over. And as such, they'll be counted as capital, which is the criteria that winning the game is based upon. So making investments actually that are not profitable over a 20 quarter period but gives good profit for the three last quarters of the game is actually still a good decision to make if you're in the late game and there's just 3 quarters left, just as a side note at the end of the game. Now, the strategy that I recommend. First of all, as I've explained earlier, watching the research costs of your opponents, really important, especially in the first quarters of the game. Second of all is to pick a market. Let's say that of course you all start with the basic jetpacks in the Hubro business simulation. let's say that a lot of your opponents go into the sporty jetpack, which is the second one that appears in third quarter in this game. So let's say that maybe none of your opponents, or maybe just a few of your opponents, are choosing to go for the safe jetpack, which is the third one that launches. And you know this because you're watching all of your opponents' research spending. You can then go into that market, and since you know when these become available, you can expand your production massively before the jetpack becomes available. And if you're one of the only few businesses in this market and you're the only one that has expanded your production enough, you can take several contracts within that market and fulfill those contracts with all the factories you have built and make massive profit in that market. What you can do with that profit is to do more research without having to take as much debt, which leads to less interest, which leads to having accumulated more capital at the end of the game. And that is really essentially the whole strategy. It's planning ahead and finding a market that's not going to be as competitive, at least for the first few quarters that market is available. And then you're going to be really taking advantage of that market not being competitive and getting several contracts, spending good money on marketing if necessary, and then selling huge volumes of that jetpack in the Hubro business simulation, for example. Now, if you're playing a sustainable business simulation, which is a simulation that Hubro has, then since this strategy involves taking a high amount of loans, then getting the reduced interest from lowering your CO2 emissions is usually optimal in those types of games, which is something to take note of. There's usually some gimmick where you get lower interest on your loans if you make decisions that lower your CO2 emissions. So sustainability is usually also a criteria that you get graded upon to see who the winner is of the competition at the end of these simulations if you're playing the sustainable business simulation. So investing into using the more sustainable options is usually worthwhile either way. Now, my last tip is that analysis fuels good decision making. So whenever you have time, look at all the screens about the balance sheets of your opponents and the market forecasts and everything like this, and looking at basically figuring out the ins and outs of the game and how it works, so that you can make good decisions even if not all of the variables are certain. Now, good luck with your competition. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I might make more videos like this in the future. Not about the exact same topic, but something else probably. And comment your take on my suggested strategy in the comments. And let me know if you have any experience with these sorts of business simulations that you can add to this discussion in the comments as well.